Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the July meeting of Leeds Council Executive Board. Lovely to see everybody. I'll just remind people as we start the meeting that this meeting is webcast. So I'm sure you can tell I'm filling in time whilst I find my papers on my iPad ahead of the meeting. So we are again, I'll start with the items at the top of the agenda. So item 1, please, which is appeals against refusal of inspection of documents.
Thank you, Chair. To confirm, there's been no appeals received for today's meeting.
Thank you. Is there any exempt information, please?
Thanks, Chair. To confirm, no exempt or confidential information for today.
Thank you. Are there any late items?
No late items of business either, Chair. No, not today.
Thank you. So I'll turn to the board and see if there's any declarations of interest. I don't see anybody. I don't see anybody declaring interests. Item 5, I'll turn to the minutes of the last meeting. And are we happy that they are a correct record? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yes, Chair. I'd like to raise a matter of accuracy and then a matter of arising that relates to that. So on item 6, which was the Children's Social Care and Health Partnerships, the bullet points in the middle of the page, the second bullet point, it says clarification was provided that the intention was for the partnership to continue to have an independent scrutineer in place, which would follow on from the role of the independent chair of the LSCP, with it being noted that the recruitment process for the new scrutineer was underway. Now, that wasn't my recollection, so I went back and watched the video of the webcast twice to confirm, and that clarification was not provided in the meeting.
Thank you. I haven't watched the webcast back, so I can't comment on that, but we'll make a note of that and follow it up.
Okay, are you happy if I raise the matter arising?
Please, yes, yeah.
So we went on in item 8. So you think I've got the hang of this by now? Thank you. So under item 8, we resolved that it be noted and endorsed that the council is committed to continuing the current model, and I stress current model, of independent oversight from the Leeds Safeguarding Children Partnership by having a role of independent scrutineer. So the current model is that the independent scrutineer chairs the Leeds Safeguarding Children Partnership and the review advisory group. It came to my attention last week, was confirmed verbally by the Director of Children's Services, the Chief Executive, and in writing by the legal advisor to the board, that that model is in fact changing, and the independent scrutineer will no longer act as the chair. Now, I went away from the exec board and full council, given the resolutions we made, with the understanding that we would continue that model. Why is that important is the key question, because when someone is the chair of the meeting, they have a different and full and thorough oversight of everything. If you're just present at a meeting, you're at the mercy of what everybody else presents to you. And in my view, this represents a downgrade of the current arrangements, and it certainly is a change. You couldn't argue that it's not a change. And there's a further change, given this morning GPC resolved that the LSCP had removed the elected member, which was the only democratic oversight of the partnership. And following on from that, because I understand the recruitment has started for the independent scrutineer, given that Councillor Venner has been removed as the elected member, on what basis was she part of the interview panel? And I'd also like to put on record that we haven't been informed of any of these changes as opposition members. And so I'd like to understand what's going on.
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Venner to come in first, then I'll ask Julie to come in, please.
Yeah, I'll respond first of all on the issue of the current model, and then I'll respond to the points you've made that was raised in general purposes this morning. So there is not a significant change to the model of independent scrutiny. Whether the person is called an independent scrutineer or a chair, they are in the same role. And just to be really clear, when our current chair has been the chair of exec, she does not hold any decision-making powers in that role. They rest with the 3 statutory partners. Working together 2018 brought in it stopped being a requirement to have an independent chair and introduced the role of independent scrutineer. A number of councils at that point went for an independent scrutineer role, where we continued with the chair. The executive of the Safeguarding Partnership made the decision to go for the independent scrutineer model, but I'm sure Rebecca Roberts can provide, as our legal advisor, can provide clarity if you need this, that it is the same role, whether they're called chair or scrutineer, they are in the same role to provide independent scrutiny of children's safeguarding arrangements. It is not in any way downgrading or diluting the role as you have suggested. And as I said, many councils already have an independent scrutineer. And again, I'm sure Julie and Rebecca can provide evidence that it is not a downgrade of the role to call them a scrutineer, which our current chair is, rather than a chair. It's the same role. With regard to the issue that was raised in general purposes this morning, I'm not sure why this the Leeds Safeguarding Children's Partnership was in the papers, because that was disbanded a number of years ago. When we developed our new models around safeguarding, the Leeds Safeguarding Children's Partnership and the Leeds Children and Families Trust Board were merged into what is called the Leeds Children and Young People's Partnership, which is a group I am part of. I've been part of since the beginning, and I've co-chaired with the current chair until recently. So I have been on that board as the elected member from its creation. With regard to the recruitment panel, the appointment is an appointment of the Leeds Safeguarding Children's Executive. So the district commander for Leeds, the director of nursing at the NHS and the director of children's services, they asked me to attend the board as the elected member who leads on children's services. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to reiterate that there has not been a change in the model. We have had a model of an independent scrutineer, and we have maintained that model, and indeed going forward we have just recruited to the new independent scrutineer, and that reflects the commitment, the absolute commitment from the LSCP executive to the importance and the significance of the role of the independent scrutineer. In terms of the independent scrutineer chairing the LSCP exec meetings, we've had a lengthy conversation about that, both with the current scrutineer and also the 3 national safeguarding facilitators. So nationally, we have a safeguarding facilitator for the local authority, for police and for health. And they've really been helpful in meeting with the exec and with the independent scrutineer, just to talk about the workings of the LSCP exec to ensure that it is as effective as it possibly can be. Within those conversations, the feedback that we had from those 3 national safeguarding facilitators was the fact that it was very difficult, actually, for the independent scrutineer to be chairing meetings. And their observation on that point, and this is based on them working across local authorities across the country, was that essentially, as we all know, it's very difficult to be chairing a meeting and actually being able to sit back and observe and scrutinise. So basically their recommendation, their feedback to us, which we'd asked them for because we want to have the best practice that we possibly can have in Leeds, was that there was a potential compromise of that independent scrutineer if we were asking them to chair a meeting. So effectively what we do have is a more robust set of circumstances which surrounds the meetings, which means that the independent scrutineer is now in a position to listen, to observe, to scrutinise, to support and to challenge in a more effective way than they may have been able to if they were trying to do both, trying to chair a meeting and provide that independent scrutiny at the same time. So I would say that actually following the feedback, what we've tried to do is to enhance further the role of that independent scrutiny in terms of them being able to be more effective in the role. As Councillor Benner has said, the LSCP executive invited Councillor Benner to take part in the recruitment process for the new independent scrutineer because of the current role that Councillor Benner has in terms of a lead member for children and families. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, I'm very quickly quite keen to get on with the agenda, but please come back.
I'm sure you are, but I fundamentally disagree with some of what's just been said. That Councillor Venner said there hasn't been a significant change, and Julie said there hasn't been a change. There is a change. If you and I swap places, right now. I'm still in the room and you're still in the room, but there's been a fundamental change. Being the chair and the independent scrutineer is a change, and this council unanimously resolved that we would maintain the current model. Incidentally, the LSCP partnership are required to publish on their website what their model is, and it is very clear as of this morning that the model is the independent scrutineer will chair the partnership and will chair the review advisory group. The executive member and the director were given a clear instruction by full council and by this executive board that they should go and argue that the current model should be maintained. So I'd like to understand it. Did that happen? Was it the case that Julie argued that we should keep the independent scrutineer as the chair and the other partners voted against? Or did she ignore the instruction of council and this executive board? And depending on the answer, I might want the city solicitor to come to a view.
Thank you. I would maintain the position that we haven't changed the model, that we've retained the same model in as much as we have the independent scrutineer as part of our LSCP exec arrangements.
Okay, in that case, Chair, I reiterate why I think this is important and why I'm making a big deal about it, because it fundamentally changes the ability of the independent scrutineer to know for themselves everything that's going on and to be able to decide what they want to scrutinise. This is about safeguarding the most vulnerable children and families in our city. My view remains, I'm open to be persuaded, but nothing that has been said has changed my mind, that the role has been downgraded. And I'd ask the city solicitor under Council Procedure Rule 14.15 to make a ruling as if there's been a breach of the executive decision under 3.32, and therefore it should be referred back to executive board and council within 28 days.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's important that we just look at the chronology of what occurred in relation to this decision making, because my understanding is, and Julie, you might be able to keep the dates, keep me right on the dates, but my understanding is that there was a resolution at full council with regard to the wording, which subsequently became a resolution of the executive board. But the resolution of full council is a statement of the position of full council, but that can't trump any executive function that needs to be a decision of the executive board. It's then my understanding that the decision of the partnership was taken after the resolution of full council, but before the executive board resolution. So actually, full council can't, although that is a position, a factual position as to their steer, if you like, it can't trump any executive delegations that is given to an officer when they sit on an independent partnership. And it's only subsequent to those decisions made by that partnership that executive board resolved about the model. But as we've heard, that model isn't by the partnership deemed to have changed.
So forgive me, effectively, if I understand what you're saying in simple terms, when full council made its resolution, the model hadn't changed, but it was okay for the partnership to ignore that. By the time it came to executive board, they changed the model. So effectively, it was correct at that point.
Well, it's not about the partnership ignoring the resolution of full council, because that can only go so far as the council representative is able to have influence over the partnership. But the function of the officer on that partnership is an executive one. And so whilst you would have regard to what the position of full council is, it's the executive that instructs, if you like, or gives the authority for the officer to represent the council on that partnership. But in any event, what we're hearing is that the model has not substantially changed. So there is no conflict.
Thank you. Tom, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, I I think it looks like the partnership made that decision in good faith with the resolution that had been made, and the view is there's clearly a difference of opinion about what the model of independent oversight is from yourself, and the rest of the people who've spoken. Can I just ask one question? Will the independent scrutineer duly have access to the same amount of information and and have the opportunity to scrutinise in exactly the same way, apart from chairing the meeting that the previous incumbent did?
Yeah, thank you. And I did want to come back on that, on the point that Councillor Lamb had made. The independent scrutineer will have exactly the same access to information that they had previously going forward, and indeed they have had, regardless of whether they chair the meeting or not. And that is, you know, to enable them obviously to maintain and to conduct their role effectively. And as I've said, actually the decision, you know, which we came to collectively as a partnership for the scrutineer not to chair the meeting is that so they can be more effective in that role of scrutiny, in terms of being able to have access to the information, listen to the information, but listen and observe the conversations and the discussions and interject and scrutinise where they feel that it's necessary for them to do so.
Thank you, Julie. Councillor Lamb, please.
I appreciate your leniency, Chair. I really have a big issue with this, and I think the conversation needs to continue outside of this meeting. On the point that Tom has just made, if I'm a member of a scrutiny board, I'm at the mercy of what the chair decides to choose with me or not. When you sit in the chair, you have a very different role and a very different level of access to information than if you're simply attending the meeting. You may have access to all of that information, but you have to choose what to go and look for and not look for. This, to me, is a clear downgrade of a very important role. And we've also taken away the only democratic oversight of that board. And I think we have to look seriously at that.
Councillor Venner, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to be really, really clear that when the person, if the scrutineer is chairing, they don't have any decision-making powers and they do not have access to information that they won't have access to going forward at all. It is the same role, whether it's called independent scrutineer or independent chair. And a number of councils have an independent scrutineer and some councils have a chair, but it is the same role. And we could get a legal view on that if you felt that was helpful, Leader. With regard to democratic oversight, as I said, I am on the Leeds Children's and Young People's Partnership and have been since it was created. My post was briefly on the Leeds Safeguarding Executive when we were embedding the new arrangements, but it's not usual that it would be. It's not on the adult side, but there is not a reduction in democratic oversight. I sit on and have always sat on the Leeds Children and Young People's Board, which replaced the Leeds Children's Safeguarding Partnership. And as the lead for Children's Services, that's why I was invited to be on the recruitment panel for the new independent scrutineer.
Thank you, Councillor Venner. I'm going to take up your suggestion, Councillor Lamb, of continuing this conversation. We are at the moment on the minutes of the last meeting. We're on the minutes of the last meeting to confirm as a record the minutes of the meeting on the 21st of June. I've noted the bullet point that you raised. We'll have a look at that. And with that, is the board happy with the minutes? Great. Let's move on to item 6. Councillor Arif, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the Director of Public Health has a statutory duty to produce an annual report describing the health of the population and recommendations to improve this. Following a break in producing the Director of Public Health annual reports during the COVID pandemic, I'm pleased to advise that these reports are now reinstated. It's good to see that Victoria has chosen to focus on children for this year's report as her first as Director of Public Health for Leeds. Children were much less likely to become ill with COVID-19 than adults, and were not the main focus of protective measures during the pandemic. However, this report highlights how the pandemic has affected the health and well-being of children profoundly and unequally. The report is particularly strong in my view because the voice of children, young people, families and partners who work with them are central. It's also worth noting that Leeds has been nationally recognised by the Association of Directors of Public Health as one of 4 reports highlighted as best practice. And this is because, as I said, children's voices are at the heart of the report, coupled with a rigorous academic approach, which together strengthens the power of recommendations. This report also adds to the momentum of other work important important work that we are leading in the city, including work we have committed to become a marmot city and our drive to reduce health inequalities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Arif. Does anybody else on the board want to comment on this report? Councillor Lamb, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's very brief, you'll be pleased to know. It's just to welcome the report and particularly the involvement and approach of including young people. And I hope that's something we'll continue to take forward in future, because I think that adds real value and colour to the report.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Victoria, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I may, I just add a few more very brief comments to add to the comments that Councillor Arif has made. Members will see that the report is by its own nature very broad in scope, because we are looking at the whole state of children's health across the city. The findings are summarised in the report, just to bring that to the attention of the board, but also we do have this 4-page child-friendly version, which often is the kind of an easy to read version for many of our kind of partners and colleagues as we've been sharing the report. So just to highlight, we have got that version of the report as well. And just to pull out two of the kind of key overarching messages from the work. Firstly, that when we look across all measures of children and young people's health across the city, almost all of those measures have worsened over the last few years of the pandemic, although it is complex and we are seeing different patterns across different areas of health. So the report does provide detailed information on that and how we should respond to it. The other key message is we are seeing the greatest impact on children and families in our most disadvantaged communities. So most vulnerable children are getting multiple effects from the factors that we see playing out. There is good news. We have seen some positive impacts of the pandemic on children and young people. And the report also shows the great work happening across the city, which we should be really proud of. So that there's a huge amount of showcasing programmes that the council leads on, but also other partners lead on across the city. So the 10 recommendations really provide a way forward to continue to meet this changing picture and very much building on the good work we do. So I do welcome the support of the board for the recommendations of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Tom, please.
Yeah, it was just to thank Victoria for the report, and I think it's a great piece of work that has been done, and it was great to have the CMO here yesterday, I think, to look at some of the services that the teams are providing. Yeah, just to thank all the partners in the city, particularly Leeds Community Health and LYPFT for the work that that had to be done during particularly during the pandemic and since, with our teams to deal with the issues that came out of this. Really challenging demand pressures in the system. So yeah, just thanks to everybody.
Thanks, Tom, and thank you, Victoria. Nobody else would like to come in. I shall turn to the recommendations on page 21, and I take it that the board is happy with those. That's great, thank you. Could we move on to item 7, please, Councillor Arif?
Yes, Chair. So at Executive Board on 15th December 2021, the implementation of the changes to the Council's charging policy for non-residential adult social care to ensure consistency in the application of the policy was approved. These were where more than one care worker is required to deliver home care services at the same time. The customer would be required to contribute towards the cost of all workers present, and the removal of the maximum assessed charge cap of £482 a week. The changes came into effect in April 2022 and have been phased in over a period of months. This report effectively provides an update on the work undertaken in implementing the changes and the impact that this had on people who receive services. A total of 226 individuals have been impacted by the changes. Any changes to the care plan of the individuals affected have been done with the input of a social worker or occupational therapist, ensuring that all care needs continue to be met under any new care arrangements. Just to say that the Director of Adults and Health retains the discretion to waive charges or service user contributions for an individual where considered appropriate, including if an individual is at risk of financial hardship. We've not received any feedback or indication that these services have reduced in quality as an impact of the changes made to the charging policy. And we are projecting a potential income or savings achieved by the changes to the charging policy in a full year to be over 3 million. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any comments on this paper? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it won't come as a surprise that we had some concerns about this policy, which were expressed. I think it's still early days. It'd be useful to get some comment on whether we think there are people who haven't taken up their care because of the additional costs, or have reduced the amount of care they're taking. It would be useful to know. I think my main comment would be it's still early days. The commitment was to come back in 12 months. I'd like to see this come back again in another 12 months so that we can keep monitoring it. If our concerns prove to be unfounded, hold our hands up and accept that, and that's delivering what you expected. But I think it's too soon to stop keeping a watching brief on it.
Thank you. Caroline, please.
Thank you very much. Just to provide some assurance to Councillor Lamb, we do absolutely monitor demand for services. We track whether demand for services is increasing. So in doing so, that would indicate to us whether the removal of the cap and the charging for 2 care workers is having an impact in deterring people from taking up services. Of course, if an individual is assessed for needing care and support, the discussion happens at that point in relation to the charges that will be applied. We absolutely undertake a financial assessment, and by doing those things, we would know, we would hear from people if they felt that they were unable to agree to a service being provided to them on the basis of the charging. So just to provide some assurance that anybody new coming into the service, we would be able to absolutely check. Our data shows that demand for services continues to increase and take up of services also continues to increase. So we're not seeing a pattern of people saying, as a result of these changes in the charging policy, that they don't want to take up those services. It's really important to labour the point also around ensuring that we don't apply a blanket policy without taking into account individual circumstances, so that discretion will apply if we find that either through the social work assessment or the financial assessment, an individual says, well, we need the service, but we can't afford it, and therefore we're not going to take it up. There is a discretion that can be applied. We haven't come across that yet, but of course that position is maintained.
Thank you, Caroline. Nobody else wants to comment on this paper. I'll turn to the recommendations on page 80, and I take it the board is happy with those.
I'm happy to add the commitment that come back.
Caroline, can you pick that point up, please?
Of course, yes, we could come back in 12 months' time
Yes.
with more data if that's required.
That's great. So just to clarify in terms of the recommendations, that point as well. Thank you, Alan. And we'll turn to item 8 then, please.
Yes, Chair, this is the final report from me. So I'm really proud to present this report, and that Leeds is the first city in Yorkshire and Humber region to become a fast track city, publicly declaring our commitment to ending the HIV/AIDS epidemic by 2030 and achieving the 000 targets, which is 0 new HIV infections, 0 AIDS-related deaths, and 0 stigma and discrimination. As seen in other large cities, Leeds has a high number of people living with HIV, as well as more people diagnosed at a later stage of infection. People living in areas of deprivation and people from newly migrated populations are overrepresented in our late HIV diagnosis rates and underrepresented within people accessing the preventative HIV drug PrEP. In addition to becoming a fast-track city for HIV, we are committed to working outside of silos when it comes to testing for blood blood-borne viruses, recognising that often communities at most risk of HIV are also the same communities at higher risk of viral hepatitis and tuberculosis. Chair, becoming a fast-track city provides us with an opportunity to galvanise existing services and initiatives, identify gaps and barriers to access, stimulating honest, open dialogue between communities and service providers, and ultimately to move towards becoming a city where awareness and conversation around HIV and blood-borne viruses is normalised, testing and treatment is accessible, and awareness and education is embedded across all communities and services. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there comments on this paper? Councillor Lamb, please.
I'm simply making a comment because I always feel bad when someone's come to present the hard work that they've done, other than to thank them for their report. And it's a good piece of work, and our group wholeheartedly endorses it and thanks you for what you've done. And yeah, I think it's something we'd all get behind. So I'm sorry I don't have anything more to ask you, but it's because you've done such a good job.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. I think we all agree with your comments on this report. It's a really positive piece of work. So with that, I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 115 and take it the board is happy with that report. So thank you, Councillor Arif. We'll move on to item 9, please, Councillor Venner.
Yes, thank you. So I'm bringing this paper in the health partnerships part of my portfolio in my role as chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board. It's a statutory requirement that we have a health and wellbeing strategy, and I'm really delighted to introduce the strategy that will take us to 2030. As with our previous strategy, it focuses hugely on improving the health of the poorest, the fastest, as a central ambition, and health inequalities, especially coming out of the pandemic, because we know that caused the widening of health inequalities. We've tried to strike a balance with the report that, of course, we want it to be ambitious and aspirational, but it also needs to reflect the lived reality of people's lives. And the report was changed as a result of some of the consultation in this direction, because obviously we hear all the time that people are struggling to get doctor's appointments and dentist appointments, and poverty is a real risk to people's health and well-being. And that needs to be reflected in the report, as well as the aspiration of where we want to be. There's been a huge amount of consultation with this report. I asked Tony last week at the Health and Wellbeing Board how many events they'd done, and Tony said they'd stopped counting after 50. It's been to every community committee, it's been to scrutiny, a huge amount of other community organisations and partnerships to get their feedback. And I hope what also comes across strongly is the centrality of people's voices. There's a reference to the Big Leeds chat, which is a wonderful event. I really enjoyed it last time we did it. I went to Growing Rooms, which is an addiction programme, met with a group of guys there and got their feedback. So you've got in there the 10 wishes from the Health and Wellbeing chat, and it also references some of the work we do, which is about us as board members getting into communities in our role as board members. So every member of the Health and Wellbeing Board is part of the allyship programme, where they're paired with a third sectoral community organisation that's doing direct work on health inequalities. I'm paired with the Gypsy and Traveller Exchange, which has been an absolute privilege to get to work directly with the community on health issues. In terms of governance, this paper belongs to the Health and Wellbeing Board. So it was signed off by the Health and Wellbeing Board last week, and we will monitor its implementations. There'll be a set of metrics against each of the 12 priorities. So Exec Board aren't being asked for approval as such, because that's the job of the Health and Wellbeing Board. We're being asked to endorse the report and to note the work that's gone into it. And Tony's here to answer detailed questions. Tony and his team have done all the work of this. I've just kind of fronted it, but they've actually done all the really hard work, and it's taken a long time to get here, and a lot of people have contributed. So thank you particularly to the Health Partnerships team. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Venner. Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you. The two things I'd be grateful for some comment on is, number one, what do we think are the outcomes, positives and the negatives of the first strategy that's being replaced? And I just have a concern that we're being asked to endorse it without seeing the metrics. And it's difficult to say, are we being ambitious enough? Are we being too ambitious? It's very difficult to give a view, and if you don't know exactly what you're measuring, there's a reason why that's not available at this point, and why Exec Board have been asked to endorse it if we don't know what the outcomes we're expecting to achieve are.
Tony, please.
Thanks. And yeah, there's been obviously a number of conversations around how best to do metrics and how to measure the success of the strategy. And one thing that was clear out of all those conversations is we didn't want to impose a huge burden on the system in terms of the paper chase that you often get around outcomes. So the inclusive growth strategy at the moment is undergoing a process as well, similar to this. And the idea is potentially to share some of those. And then probably equally importantly, we're doing a piece of work with the team that are working on the Marmot city work as well. And the idea, obviously, we've got a new office of data analytics, is just to have one repository for a lot of our data, for a lot of our outcomes, and to report once. So because that work has been delayed a little bit, the idea has been obviously not to sort of land a load of metrics and then have to review them in a few months' time. Obviously, we can bring those back to Exec Board in October, and that's the plan basically for when we'll do that piece of work. Also, really important point about the first strategy, I think, and I think there's a lot of things that have been reshaped by the approach of the last health and wellbeing strategy. Probably the work around mental health has potentially been the most significant, around mentally healthy city, and how we've reshaped and remodeled mental health services to be far more community focused and deliver stronger outcomes for particular groups. The focus on improving the health of the poorest the fastest has been a challenge in many ways, but it has galvanised opinion, particularly in neighbourhoods, around where we put services, how we remodel some of the pathways that we've had, and obviously a lot of the focus on areas like obesity and physical activity have had some considerable success as well, albeit obviously some of the bigger challenges I think are around areas like healthy life expectancy, and some of the sort of bigger areas around health inequality. And I guess finally, one of the things that we've had a lot of plaudits for nationally around the health and wellbeing strategy is the manner in which we've brought together health priorities with economic and community priorities as well. And we were one of the first cities, obviously, to have some shared approaches across our economic inclusive growth strategy and our health and wellbeing strategy. And that work continues. And then also finally, as Councillor Venner said, some of the work looking at disadvantaged communities and building that community and third sector response, which the Health and Wellbeing Board under Councillor Venner's leadership has led from the front. There are many other examples that are in recent Health and Wellbeing Board papers that we can also share as well. And obviously we'd welcome coming back to Exec Board for a further conversation.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Venner, please.
I just wanted to add, I mean, I highlighted the allyship programme because that's something I'm particularly proud of, and especially having come from the third sector myself. I think as well, a real success out of the last strategy and out of the Health and Wellbeing Board has been the creation of the team leads approach, and the fact that you've got the most senior people in the health and care system working directly with people who are from frontline community groups and working directly with people who are using in receipt of services. And I think that team leads approach of collaboration and trust and warmth and cooperation really paid off during the pandemic. And I think the vaccine programme is probably the best example of that, and the best example of the health system going out into communities. Obviously, Councillor Reef led a lot of that work in terms of the, vaccine centres going out to community venues, particularly in communities that were struggling to access the vaccine or were reluctant to. So I think the creation of team leads has really come to the fore through the pandemic and through some of the challenges we're having now. And I'd see that as a success of the last strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Venner. I don't see anybody else want to come to talk, so I shall turn to the recommendations on page 134, and I take it the board is happy with those recommendations. That's great. We'll move on to item 10, please, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Leader. And my report for today's Executive Board is a combination of both the financial health monitoring and the capital programme for Q1 as the finance report. I suppose I should start by saying it's fair to say that the financial position that we find ourselves in is very challenging one for us at the moment, but that we are working extremely hard as an organisation to mitigate any of the overspends that are within this report. So within the report, it outlines an overspend projected of 28.5 million at Q1 on the financial health monitoring report. We do hope that we'll be able to get to a balanced position by the end of the year. But it must also be noted that if we can't get to that balanced position by the end of the year, that the impact on our reserves will be also felt if we need to meet them by our reserves as well. There are a number of mitigations that are taking place to bring the overspends within budget within the next 3 quarters, and they're also outlined in the report and detailed in the report for Exec Board to see. Also, the capital programme update is within the report, and with an overspend in there of 0.8 million, which is to do with the cost of debt with the increased interest rates that we've seen recently. And that is expected to come also back in within budget. You'll also see the capital programme within that report that's really detailed, showing all the different projects and also the recommendations around a number of injections of finance into the HRA to help fund some of these capital programmes. It's very detailed. I don't want to go through every detail, so I shall leave it for questions, Leader, if that's all right.
Thank you. Are there any comments, please? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's obviously a very challenging time and concerning, and the implication of the papers is it's likely to get worse before it gets better. Children's services is the obvious area that stands out as I fully accept demand-led pressures. If a child needs support and needs a placement, we have to provide it. And quite right too, and the cost should be irrelevant. But the question is for a bit more detail and clarity about what we think we can do to close that gap. And also, we seem to come to this point every year where we say, well, if we put enough in for children's services, we increase the budget, and then it's not enough again the next year, and repeat. And I just wonder if we need a fundamental rethink collectively as a council about how we approach that, and stop finding ourselves in this position, because it puts an intolerable pressure on every other part of the council to step up to the plate and find the money to close the gap.
Tom, please.
Yeah, maybe if I come in, and then I don't, other members may want to come in. I think it's important to just make a couple of points. That I think Councillor Lamb's right to flag that this will get slightly worse before it gets better. I think that's our expectation at the next Exec Board, unfortunately, and it is due to demand pressures principally around children's. We have an inbuilt pressure in the system that's been inherited from last year and the year before as well, and it's directly linked actually to Victoria's paper on the impact of the pandemic and the consequent impact of the cost of living crisis on too many families in Leeds who are really struggling and finding it very hard. And as you say, we can't not do what's needed to help them. I think the point I wanted to make, the important point I wanted to make, was that this isn't just an issue for Leeds. It is an issue for right across the sector. And a quick Google of other councils and the pressures that they're under will send you to numbers which are nearly 4 times bigger than ours, 3 times bigger than ours, sorry, and quite a range of other councils in a similar position. Last spending settlement, I think to be fair to the overall lobbying that was done cross-party and then the government's response, I think there was quite an effort to fill the gap on adult social care. I know that if we were to get into the detail of that, there would be strong views about whether it's enough, and given the inflationary linked pay rises and, you know, the state of the market, it's still really challenging on that side and really challenging with NHS partners. However, there was, you know, quite an increase. There wasn't an increase in children's. And at the time, you know, we lobbied cross-party. I certainly lobbied on the national role I have, and I still feel that this is an area that it's a gap that needs plugging, and it's not just about Leeds, it's about the whole sector and being funded to play the role that we want to play. The way that government funding works is that there's a separation between normal expenditure on services and demand-led services, which are in a different part of the government budget, and they basically they sort of recognise in the national government system that if demand happens, you've got to meet it on things like, you know, benefits payments, for example. We don't have that, and I think that's what you've seen in this system, and it's something that we need to lobby about nationally, and we need to do everything that we can to address it in the city as well, because you're right, change is needed here as well, but it's in line with national reforms, and it's in line with a national picture that's really, really challenging.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Venner, please.
I'll come in with a brief overview and then I'll hand over to Julie and Victoria in terms of more detail. I mean, absolutely, it is a national picture. I sit on the LGA board for children and people, which is the national cross-party board, and it is everybody's biggest challenge is children's services. We've currently got a rate per 10,000 of 86 per 10,000 is our looked after rate. I think the core city average is about 94. So believe it or not, we are still doing better than a lot of councils in keeping children out of care. But the particular pressure we've got, and again, it's a national issue, is the number of adolescents that are coming into care and coming in with particularly complex needs. And that's where you get the really expensive external residential placements. We do have a number of strands of work which are overseeing this, which are being overseen by the delivery board. It's a specific delivery board around this. We've talked about, I mean, a lot of these we approved last year in exec board, but we haven't yet seen the financial benefit, but should start to this year. So we agreed last year to open another 8 children's homes. Field Terrace and Deputy Leader and Councillor Hayden's ward is due to open later this year. That alone is going to bring 5 children back to Leeds who will currently be in really specialist placements, because that's for children with very, very complex physical disabilities and learning disabilities. It's a very similar model to Acorn House. And we've just done a briefing for councillors in the ward where we're proposing to open our first children's home after that. So things like that are coming to fruition and should have an impact this year. Similarly, we've learned a lot from adults. One of our Investor Save proposals was about having more people in commissioning. So there's more work around driving down some of the prices of those very expensive care packages. We've also got recruitment out at the moment for a transformation team in children's, which again will mirror what we have in adults in terms of doing some of that turnaround work, some of that edge of care work, particularly focusing on, reunification and keeping adolescents out of care. That's just an overview. I'll let Julie and Victoria, who are closer to it, come in with more detail. But some of the things we planned last year should start to pay off this year.
Julie, please.
Thank you, Leader. I suppose I'd just like to reiterate what's already been said in terms of this being a national challenge, a national problem. The Josh McAllister review, is really clear that we've got a broken system, especially when it comes to placements. As Councillor Venner says, although we have, continue to have many challenges in Leeds, our trajectory still is a positive trajectory in terms of our comparators. In terms of some of the specific things that we are doing, as Councillor Bennett said, we are increasing our own internal provision, and they're, smaller residential children's homes who will have the capacity to really meet the needs of some children who are currently in external placements, who do have the most complex needs and do require that small group specialist living. In recognition of the challenges that we have got around adolescents in particular coming into care, and within that, if we think about, child exploitation, criminal exploitation, sexual exploitation, what we refer to as risk outside the home, but also serious youth violence and the increase that we have seen in that right across the country, there is a need for, real specialist workers. And with that in mind, we are developing a service specifically for adolescents. Equally linked to that is the work that we're doing around an additional level of foster carers, again, who have the skills, the experience, the knowledge to respond directly to the particular challenges. From adolescence. I started my career working in residential children's homes. I developed adolescent support services. I loved working with adolescents, but it's not everybody's skill set. So again, really developing those particular foster carers who do have the skill set is going to be key. I think the other thing that we're doing really is looking at the local market. We do have private providers operating in Leeds. We want Leeds children to be in Leeds. So a lot of work through our commissioning team to shape that local market to ensure that our Leeds children can stay in Leeds, in high quality care, even if it's not within our own. I think the other bit to really highlight here is early intervention and prevention. And the commitment within the city, and it's been an ongoing commitment to early intervention and prevention. So really thinking about our restorative early support teams, thinking about our work within the clusters, our children's centres, our work with our schools, is absolutely key. And that continued focus really in terms of family help and the Josh McAllister review and what that's going to look like in Leeds. So, I meet with directors of children's services from the core cities, from councils right across the country, and all of us are grappling with this issue in terms of demand and demography, but there's certainly an awful lot of work going on, and we will continue to keep our foot on the pedal.
Thank you. Victoria, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would just add that we are working across all services and directorates on the position within children's and families, and we're working well together. We're also, it will take time to implement some of these initiatives that we've got working on, and therefore we are going to have to take action across the council as well to help bring this position down. So we're working, obviously in the report it mentions around the recruitment freeze and the non-essential spend. We're also reviewing all budgets and looking at where we're able to reduce. We are doing, and we'll bring options to Executive Board in September and October. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the comments, very helpful. Where I'd like a little bit of reassurance is that outside of the demand-led pressures, that we're doing everything that we can to control costs. And as you know, Julie and Tom, and I'm sure I'm not alone, my inbox is very full. And I'm aware of a lot of cases that are on your desks, of complex cases that should never have got there, that become more expensive and more resource intensive because they didn't get dealt with as they should have done. And it's bad outcomes for young people and families, and more cost and pressure to the council. And that's there. I'd like some reassurance that, and perhaps for next time, to see a clear action plan of what we're doing to get on top of those cases and those kind of situations, and that we're managing everything that's in our gift to control. So I'd be grateful for some reassurance on those things, please.
Tom, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm sure Julie can come in on that. I would, when we deal with thousands of cases every year, and it's inevitable that we're not always going to get it right. And where we don't, we need to, address that and deal with it. And that's what we're doing in cases, that will be in the system. I would say that we're dealing with a huge amount of demand in a system that is set up in a way that, you know, again, this is a cross-party position across, you know, across the LGA, in a way that is just not sustainable for the councils in terms of meeting the demand that's in the system. And again, it goes back to Victoria's report about, you know, the impact of the pandemic, the subsequent impact of cost of living crisis, and the ability of a system to deal with a pressure that is set up to you know, drive financial challenge to the council alone. In a way that just isn't sustainable, and that's right across the country. And it's a system that I think DfE does recognise they need to look at. So yeah, but I'm sure that Julie can provide more detail and reassurance.
Julie, please.
Thank you. Absolutely, Councillor Lamb. You know, at the end of the day, you know, we are in the roles that we're in, you know, every level of the directorate. We choose to work with children and families. We choose to come into the public sector because we've got a vocation, you know, and that vocation is to deliver the very, very best service and the best quality service that we can for children and families. And central to that is a focus on best practice, you know, and that culture, you know, the culture that we talk about in Leeds of working with, you know, so really seeing our children, our families as our key partners, you know, the importance of listening to them, you know, absolutely, and actually acknowledging where we don't get it right. You know, we are a large core city. We're supporting thousands of children and families, and there will be times when we do not get it right, and we've got to have the responsibility, the humility, you know, to acknowledge when that is the case. But you know, I can speak, you know, on behalf of, you know, colleagues right across the directorate. You know, we're absolutely committed to ensuring that we get the best practice and that we learn. You know, we learn elsewhere. You know, so again, we look outwards. We've recently had Carleen Furman, who is a renowned, you know, academic in terms of risk outside the home. So again, you know, wanting to keep that innovation, wanting to keep that focus on best practice and learning. I think, as Tom has said, and as we've touched on previously, in some areas we've seen more than 100% increase in demand, you know, since 2016, 2018. So with the best will in the world, you know, that does create additional pressures and additional challenges, as we've talked about. But key to everything that we're doing, Leeds, has got to be keeping the child at the centre, you know, and in order to do that effectively, it's about that focus on practice, and we'll never take our eye off that.
Thank you, Julie. Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, and thanks for that commitment around keeping children safe in the city, Julie and Tom. I think it's really important. But just to move back to the finances, as we are on a financial paper, if that's okay. As I set out at the beginning, when I was introducing the report, we're in a very challenging position financially, and indeed it is likely to get worse before it gets better. As a local authority, we are currently underfunded by government, and clearly we are seeing coming through the pressures in all service areas at the moment, because the budget is just not sufficient enough to cover the need and the demand within the city. Clearly, children's is obviously where the biggest demand lies at the moment, and you've heard about the national effect of that demand as well today. I think as an authority, we bring to Executive Board every month a clear, open, transparent report on our finances that details to you the position that we are currently in at that period in time. And we also have yourself, Councillor Arms, sitting as an independent member of the opposition, who gets those papers and is able to comment them as you have done today, clearly. I would add to the commitment that we have around that and around our scrutiny arrangements, that the work that we're undertaking in several work stream areas to do with bringing hopefully the position of the overspend into a better position, that I'm more than happy to meet outside of Executive Board to ensure that you have as up-to-date briefing as possible on the current financial position, and also the action plan and the work going on to bring that into line. And I'm happy to set that up for you and ensure that that's done, as well as I mentioned, all the other transparent methods that we have around scrutiny.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 208 and take it everybody is happy with those recommendations. That's great. Thanks. And we're on to item 11, please, Councillor Harland.
Thank you, Leader. This report brings a further update on the Council's position regarding the cost of living crisis and the actions we've taken with our partners to help tackle it since our last update back in March. It outlines the great work being done across the Council and what support is being delivered by Leeds City Council, our third sector partners, faith groups and others. The report shows how we and those partners are proactive in making sure the available support is there and is getting to the right place where it's most needed. Even with those advice services, the emergency support we provide and the strong network of food banks in Leeds, many residents are facing worsening situations and going without essentials. Our local welfare support is facing unprecedented and unsustainable demand. Our welfare rights unit is facing a situation where clients are increasingly receiving all the benefits that they are entitled to, but are still unable to pay for the essentials. A sobering thought, with inflation still high, the energy price guarantee effectively coming to an end, and basic income not sufficient to meet basic needs. The appendices to the report go into much greater detail and data of what has been achieved, but they also show some very much stark statistics. Some case studies are also referenced within the report from some of our third sector partners. It seems wrong in some ways to say that it's a good report due to the nature of some of the content, but as ever, the teams are working to ensure our residents are supported when and where needed. I'd like to thank our teams for their continued support and dedication when dealing with people in such difficult circumstances. It cannot be easy for them to face day to day, day in, day out. Obviously, we will bring further updates as the cost of living crisis doesn't appear to be easing as yet, but we can rest assured that we are always doing all we can and will continue to do everything we can to support our residents across the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harland. Are there any comments on this paper, please? Okay, don't see anybody else wanting to come in, so I will thank the officers for all their work on developing this strategy and supporting people in the city, and thank you, Councillor Harland. I'll turn to the recommendations on page 263 and take it the board is happy with this paper. That's great, and we'll turn to item 12, please, Councillor Harland.
Thank you again, Leader. So, I'm pleased to bring the annual equality report on progress against our equality improvement priorities to Exec Board for the 22-23 period. As members will be aware, we have a duty under the Equality Act 2010 to set out equality improvement priorities and report against these annually. There is an expectation that the content of these priorities reflect the size and functions of the relevant public sector organisations setting them. The priorities are a snapshot of the extensive work taking place across the council and are supported by a much wider range of work within the organisation and the city to make us the best city for equality, diversity and inclusion work. The council has continued to make good progress across its services in considering the needs and aspirations of service users from protected characteristic groups, despite the ongoing legacy challenges caused by Brexit, the pandemic, as well as the current cost of living crisis. The report shows that Leeds is one of the most diverse local authority areas in the country, and this is reflected in the results of the census, not consensus, 2021. The city continues to have a large number of people who identify as disabled and a very varied faith landscape. We've seen increases in both the youngest and oldest age demographics. The proportion of people from ethnically diverse backgrounds has increased significantly since 2011, with over a quarter of the population now from non-white British backgrounds. For the first time, we have data on sexual orientation and gender identity, with Leeds having a larger than national average proportion of people from the LGBT+ community. Back in February this year, we presented a new vision and action plan for equality, diversity and inclusion for the council after wide consultation. This work underpins the equality improvement priorities that we have already in place and reinforces our commitment to step up a gear and complements our best city approach. We have also included a part-year update against the 3 pillars of the EDI action plan in the report on the council as an employer, our service delivery and our work with people and communities. As shown in the previous cost of living update report, inequalities continue to impact households in Leeds and across the country. And whilst this report shows the breadth and depth of what we do on this very important agenda, we also recognise we still have more to do. I would, however, like to thank our equalities team, the equality hubs, our staff networks and the cross-party equality member champions, Councillors Bithell, Blackburn, Galton and Cohen for their continued work and support on this very important agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harland. Are there any comments on this paper? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like a little more information and clarity about the role of the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian and why we felt the need to introduce it. My understanding is that there are still a lot of staff in this organisation that feel they are being held back or missing out on opportunities because of their characteristics. And I was surprised, I have to say, to read that in this organisation. So why do we feel the need to do that? I would like to think we're an organisation that the exact opposite is the case.
Caroline, please.
Thank you. Yes, happy to come in here. We felt very much the need to look at what we were doing in social care, both adults and children's social care, about our staff's experiences of doing the job every day, both in terms of their experiences when talking to and meeting with communities, but also in their experiences as members of staff in our respective directorates. And it was very much on the model that the NHS has already in place. The NHS has Freedom to Speak Up Guardians to provide a confidential and anonymous place for staff to go and talk about their experiences. And they could be related to the work that they do every day, or it could be around the support they receive from their managers. And this came about as a result of the Workforce Race Equality Standard. So we piloted back in 2019. We were one of 17 authorities that put our hands up to say we would like to pilot looking at the Workforce Race Equality Standard within Leeds, really very much focusing on the experience of our social work staff in adults and children's. And part of that pilot entailed looking at and talking to a staff around how they were feeling. And a number of recommendations came about from that Workforce Race Equality Standard review, as it were. And in parallel to that, what we decided was to address some of the concerns that staff were experiencing by developing this post of Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, a unique post in local authorities. No other local authority has done it. But as I say, modelling on the benefits that that role was bringing to our NHS partners. So we thought, we also want to be proactive around giving our staff the opportunity and a safe space where they might want to raise their concerns. Now, this isn't specifically about people's experiences around racism or ethnicity. It's all protected characteristics, but it's also around other matters where people feel that they don't want to go down a grievance route, for example, or they don't have confidence in raising a concern with their direct line manager and want to do it in a confidential way. So that's how we've developed the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian role. That the person in that post, Vanessa Wenham, has been in post for several months now. We meet with her regularly, and her feedback is that this is not just about our workforce that are from ethnically diverse backgrounds. She hears and speaks to staff from all disciplines and all backgrounds. So just a bit of a reassurance that it isn't specific to ethnicity and race.
Thank you. Tom, please.
Yeah, I just add, just fully support what Caroline said, and just add that I see it very much as a short and example of a confident organisation in this area that we can put a post like this in place. I think we do generally have a good track record. I think we've got a good history, and as you said in your question, it's one that we've always taken extremely seriously. It's one of the reasons I came to Leeds, because of its track record in this area. And I think we're doing fantastic work. However, we're a big organisation. We're very diverse. We run lots and lots of different services. So to have a single culture across the whole of 15,000 people is really hard. And having, the processes we have in place, through HR and through, through the unions, through our staff networks, all add layers, if you like, of reassurance that we've got the right things in place to do the job that we need doing. The recent staff survey showed that 9 out of 10 people who filled in the survey said that we took equality and diversity and inclusion seriously in their team, which is to get a figure like that is pretty astonishing, actually, in my experience. And that was a survey of over 8,000 people. However, a lot of people didn't fill in the survey, and a lot of people in a big organisation sometimes feel that if they speak up, they might be penalised in some way, even though from my position and from, I'm sure, all members' position around this table, we wouldn't want that to be the case. So having something like the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, which has worked well in the NHS, was an innovation that we felt was important to bring in, and Vanessa's doing a fantastic job. I see all the individual cases, and there is a real mixture, but I think it definitely is adding value and maybe hitting those areas of the council that we just don't quite manage to reach in all the other things that we're doing with good intent.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And I'd just like to add to agree with what's already been said, but just to add to that, there is a lot of work that's going on analysing the results of the recent staff survey, the STAR survey, and it will be going to scrutiny in September with all of that detail. It will also then be coming to executive board, so we'll have the opportunity to discuss it again at executive board with the results of that. But the kind of headline that's coming out of that is that our staff are, happy in the areas that they're working in. And the other thing to note is the level of work that's going on in equality, diversity and inclusion within the organisation. And there will be a paper coming to executive board around all of that work that we've been undertaking from the Be Your Best programme with 2,200 managers and mandatory training in EDI for all of those managers to be able to cascade that throughout the organisation. So that work and all that detail will be coming through to executive board. Hopefully, Councillor Lamb, to reassure you around the work that we're doing as an organisation to ensure that we are an equal, a diverse and inclusive organisation.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just I welcome the information that's going to come back to us, and that's what I was going to ask by way of a follow-up. I'll certainly keep an open mind. It was a surprise to me that the implication of having this post is that some of our staff didn't feel free to speak up, and I didn't feel that was the kind of organisation we are. I think in the main we're certainly not, but I'll be interested to see what the results are, and I hope this is sort of post that ultimately I can see it can be of value. I'll keep an open mind, but you'd hope it wasn't necessary to have it, that our managers can deal with those queries. But I look forward to the information coming back.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Are there any more comments on this report, please? I don't see anybody else coming in, so I'll turn to the recommendations on page 299, and I see the board is happy with those recommendations. Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Harland. And we'll move on to Councillor Rafique's papers, please, in item 13.
Thank you, Leader. This is the annual report for Leeds Pipe District Heating Network, which is well established across Leeds, following 3 main phases. The latest is due to be completed in early 2024. Customers continue to connect to the network, and there's been a rapid increase in the number of prospective customers. I think paragraph 15 in the report explains who are continuing to connect with our network. The annual report also provides an update of the progress since the last report, which was brought to Executive Board in November 2022, a summary of the performance of the network over the past year, and it provides a performance forecast for 2023-24, an outline of planned construction, including seeking approval for an application to the Green Heat Network Fund grant scheme, an update on the continuing development of heat network zoning policy by central government, an update on the council's plan to submit an application to the Heat Trust for accreditation to quality assure the network and prepare for forthcoming regulation. Paragraph 18, table 3, explains the benefits and savings to customers, both in terms of our own civic buildings, businesses, non-domestic customers, and also housing Leeds residents as well. We are also looking to expand the scheme to South Bank and around Wellington Street. All in all, I think it's a very positive story. It's one of the exemplar projects of its kind around the country. So the recommendation of the report is to support the continued expansion of the network and further enhance the council's credibility to the market. I'll stop there and take any questions or comments.
Thank you. Are there any questions, please? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I would agree with Councillor Rafiq. This is a success story so far for the council. I think my questions are really around, one, are we on track to for it to come into surplus as per the project plans? What's the limit of the capacity, and what are the risks of expansion?
Polly, would you like to pick those questions up, please?
Sure. So yes, we are on track to come into surplus. We've seen a massive growth over the last year or so, especially with the changes in energy prices. So that's positive. I can't think what your second question was. I can remember your third. What was? Sorry, can you just say your second question again?
That means I have to remember it as well now. So yeah, what's the capacity? There has to be an ultimate amount of heat you can provide.
Yeah, I'd written down the answer to the question, but not the question. It threw me. So we're using about 15% of the heat at the moment, so it's still got a lot of potential for further expansion. I suppose the other thing to bear in mind, that's linking it to the energy from waste plant. With our next stage of expansion, we're looking to bring in additional heat sources, so actually that changes it again. So there is an ultimate limit in certain bits of the pipe network, so we're doing an audit at the moment to see where the pinch points are, but it's got a long way to go before we reach that capacity, and it's got other ways of expanding. So, and then the third one about risk of expansion, I think it's probably the same risks as it's always been from the beginning, that we need to make sure that we've got good resilience throughout the network, and any expansion that we do with resilience at the forefront, which we have to, because otherwise customers will not connect to us, and we've evidenced that with our delivery to date. And obviously in terms of the sort of the financial side, just making sure there's a robust business case. And again, we've taken some difficult decisions over the time where we have chosen not to expand in certain areas because there wasn't enough variety of customers. So I think when we look to expand into something like the South Bank, there has to be multiple customers in order to make sure that that's a sure decision. But I think we've evidenced that we've done that all the way to date. So I feel confident that we'll carry on along those lines.
Thank you, Polly. If there's no one else that wants to speak on this item, please, I'll turn to the recommendations on page 377, and I see the board are happy with those recommendations. So if we could move on to item 14, please, Councillor Rafiq.
Thank you, Chair. This report has been brought as a result of the white paper that was brought to full council in January of this year, which requested that we look at the potential for community bonds. The report also outlined the progress date on climate emergency since 2009, including details of monies spent in the region of £500 million on related projects and initiatives. Going back to the community bonds, although the community bonds do have a role to play in terms of engagement and raising awareness, they play a smaller role in terms of the overall finance that can be contributed. The council's focus is to focus its resources on key areas of action that will accelerate our path to net zero. For example, I work with the Lloyds to develop a retrofit scheme for our homeowners, or to leverage further investment from our commercial sector, from businesses, to roll out or match fund the grant funding to roll out the electric vehicle infrastructure. Other than that, I think I mentioned about the actual raising awareness and engagement. I think the complex policy framework and the lack of availability of skills in supply chain are often bigger barriers than the ability of finance in this case. The team is actually working hard. We've continued to deliver an average of 35 million per year of grant funding. And the fund is for 23-24 expected to contribute at the same level as previous years. Again, I'll stop there and happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you. Other comments on this paper? Councillor Lamb, please.
Just one simple question for Councillor Rafiq. Just do you agree with me that what the paper demonstrates clearly is that municipal bonds are not the right option for the council at the moment?
I think as I said, finance isn't our biggest problem. It's some of the other things. And if to raise $1 million to do all that work to manage the bonds and then the company, and the report explains, obviously there are other councils who have done it, but we're not looking about multi-million pounds. I think you're looking at maybe 500,000, 700,000, $1 million. The most, and the administrative work involved, it's probably not the best option going forward at this moment in time.
Thank you. If nobody else wants to comment on this paper, we'll turn to the recommendations, which again confirms the question, Council. I'm around it not being the right option at the moment. So I see everybody on the board is happy with those recommendations. Thank you, Councillor Rafiq, and we're on to Councillor Lennox's paper, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to introduce this paper, which is the revised homelessness strategy for 2023 to 2028. So if accepted, this will run for 5 years as our strategy to replace the previous 2019 strategy. And as a local authority, we do have a legal requirement to refresh these on a regular basis. The strategy covers a number of key themes for the service, including 4 ambitions which have been identified, which namely are universal prevention, which seeks to strengthen partnerships both internally and externally. And I think at this point, it's just worth mentioning that we have a really, really good record on homelessness prevention in our city, which is down to those partnerships. Our record is that 75% of people faced with homelessness in the city are supported into accommodation. And the national picture, that's some of the highest in the country. The national picture is 52% of homelessness is prevented. So just to underline what our record on that is. The second of the key themes is targeted prevention, which is particularly for under and overrepresented groups of people within the city. The third is intervention, which is for those at risk of homelessness to ensure tenancy sustainment. And the fourth being an integrated approach to building on our support model to make sure that the right mix of options are available to assist those facing homelessness. So consultations taken place with a wide range of key partners detailed in the report, all of whom are supportive of its aims. We want the improvements to be done with people to ensure it meets their needs and promotes positive engagement. And I'd just also like to highlight some of the fantastic work delivered by Leeds Housing Options. The promotion and development of the Advice Aid, which is an online tool allowing people to self-help. And in its first year, over 2,500 people accessed the site for self-help advice. And this tool supports the early intervention model of encouraging customer contact with the service as early as possible. The Youth Hub has been created in partnership with Our Way Leeds, which is a joint protocol between housing and children's services to strengthen the offer to young people in the city facing homelessness issues. We've purchased 30 properties through the Rough Sleeper Accommodation Programme in the city to provide accommodation and intensive support to those most in need. Consistent with the strong performance that I mentioned before, the figure is around 80%, which is considerably higher than the national figure, which is now at 54%. So those are updated figures. And that's our extremely low numbers of applicants to housing options are being placed in temporary accommodation. We also have an exemplary record on that. We've got around 140, I think as of today, it's 149 people in temporary accommodation, which in compared with other core cities is a very, very different figure. Some are running into their thousands in temporary accommodation. That said, we're not complacent, and I will be working hard with the service to ensure that Housing Options remains a strong performer nationally to prevent homelessness in the city, particularly given the recent challenges faced around affordability and the increased demand from customers for assistance. So the board today is asked to consider the recommendations of the report and approve the new strategy, approve our prevention ambitions, approve the focus on overrepresented groups, namely 16 and 17-year-olds, and potentially those within the LGBT community, Black African, Caribbean and Black British homelessness applicants, and also to note the financial risks associated with the increased use of emergency accommodation. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Lennox. Any questions, please, Councillor Lamb?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's quite brief again. I had a very good briefing from Kerry earlier in the week, and I know it's her first executive board, so I promised I wouldn't be too challenging. And so Councillor Lennox's first paper as well. So my question again, I absolutely support the aims and objectives. The question is really about metrics again and measuring so that we can really be robust and focused on delivering the right outcomes. And what are the things that we're going to measure specifically, how we know a year from now that we've made good progress and we're happy with the progress that we've made.
Thank you. Kerry, please.
Thank you. So we did a review of all our data in January 2023. So that has enabled us to see where the greatest need is. So what we need to be doing now is really slicing down that data and understanding, what postcodes in the city are overrepresented, what the family compositions are like, and then we can really do sort of more targeted outreach to those groups, more targeted communication in the local communities, work with organisations within the communities to make sure that we are targeting the people most in need, and the data we have will enable us to do that. So hopefully we'll be able to review it at 6 months and see whether we've made a difference.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or comments on this paper? That's great. I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 431, and I take it the board are happy with the recommendations. Great, thank you. And with that, I shall close the meeting, and I hope everybody has some time off in the summer. Thank you.